We've encountered developers that have said, yeah, I did one modular project and I'll never do it again. But they went with the wrong modular type. It doesn't mean modular doesn't work. It just may mean that particular modular type was not appropriate.
Shipping container development, steel frame, modular, and wood frame modular. Which system do you like the best out of all three?
It really depends. We were just very intrigued with how can we build high quality housing faster and cheaper. If you don't have a contractor that's completely committed, their fees are probably going to be higher. We're just all in. We're not halfway in. We're committed to doing this and learning about it and becoming experts at this. There is an educational component to this, and there is risk based on not knowing what's happening until you built one of these. I'm Michael Bond. I'm a senior principal with Studio 111. We're a group of architects, landscape architects, and urban designers dedicated to restoring cities. There are a lot of practice themes that we focus on to make cities more livable and vibrant. Housing for all is one of them. Creating community in place, enhancing the public realm, 21st century mobility, equity and sustainability are all important issues for improving cities. And I think our focus here really is on affordable housing, which is really important. We are located in downtown Long Beach, and most of our work is in Southern California. Our focus is market rate housing, affordable housing, and within the affordable housing world, senior housing, artist housing, student housing, veteran housing, housing for the unhoused.
I'm Erica Stubbstad. I'm a design director with Studio 111. I've been with Studio for 8 years. I do all sorts of housing, from market rate to affordable housing, adaptive reuse, modular, traditional stick-built. We also do commercial and some community-based projects.
I'm Justin Roth. I'm a project manager with Studio 111. I've been here for 3 years. I've been in the profession for 10 years. My main focus has been housing and affordable housing, with the hyper focus of the modular aspect. I've worked on 5 projects that are modular based, all at various stages. Today's focus is really going to be on kind of 3 types of modular construction: container, steel framed, and wood framed.
We just noticed how expensive affordable housing is. Average cost right now is at $500,000 a unit. And we were just very intrigued with how can we build high quality housing faster and cheaper. It's that triangle that you can only do 2 out of 3, and we're trying to hit all 3. Modular housing has a place for that. With modular housing, there is an opportunity to do it faster, cheaper, and better because they're done in factories. The quality can be better. We started our first project with shipping containers in 2012. 2 of the containers provided a commercial kitchen, and the 3rd container was a bar. We just had such a great time and learned so much about it. Our involvement with containers continued in the retail realm for many years. We've done 2 projects for Steelcraft, as well as a project for Lab called Leisure Town. We felt really comfortable with the material, how it comes together. This challenge of how to create affordable housing more cost effectively, working with a developer, contractor, and us together, just saying we're going to be all in on this as strategic partners and dive into our first development, which is known as Watts Works. It's 25 units. That's where we started. We worked with a container fabricator out in Idaho. Our preliminary discussions did show that the cost of the containers would be less than conventional construction. The average cost of building an affordable housing unit was around $500,000 per unit. We were able to get just a little under $400,000 a unit, which would be about a 20% savings. We've also learned that scheduling wise, that this can be quicker. While the site work is being done, the units can be fabricated offsite, and there can be some overlap in the construction schedule of both of those uses. And then State of California approves the modular units, which we have found to be much faster than local public agencies. We can get an approval in as fast as 15 working days.
And how'd you vet this shipping container retrofit manufacturer?
We reached out to a number of them, and due to schedule, bid, and comfort level, we chose to go with Permit for the first project in Idaho. Most of their work was actually accessory dwelling units, smaller units. Our project was one of the larger or first multifamily ones. They had a couple of them ahead of us, and that was good. We wanted them to work out the bugs with them so that when we worked on this one, that those issues would be worked through. It's 25 units, and it should be completed in about 20 days. Well, the site itself is 6,000 square feet. It's a traditional scaled site for a single family home, and that's what was on here before. On a corridor that allows greater density, we're able to get 25 units. The units are comprised each of two containers that are put together. So each container is 160 square feet. Together, it makes a 320 square foot micro unit, which is a studio that has a bathroom, a kitchen area, and then a living, sleeping area. So we have on the ground floor 4 units, and then on the upper 8 total. We stepped the building back to lower the scale to the adjacent neighborhood. So the community room, bike storage are also configured with containers. Corridors between the containers were steel infill, and then the stairs were steel as well, built off-site and then brought in. And even our elevator is a modular elevator, so it was fabricated off-site and dropped in as well. A whole set of containers would come and they'd set one floor. And then the container and modular company would continue fabricating containers off-site for another month. And in between then, the steel channels would be put on top of the roofs of these containers, and then the next set of containers would come. So every month we had a shipment of containers arrive. We used 58 shipping containers to create the 25 unit. We put most of the height at the corner.
Yeah, we're real close to a 45-foot high project parapet at the uppermost level for the roof.
Yeah, that parapet helps screen the equipment on the roof. We needed a significant amount of open space. So that open space is dispersed on the ground floor as well as on the roof deck. This is an affordable housing development focused on the homeless. The idea was to clad it so that it was a more familiar material for the residential neighborhood that it exists in. They're called Allura boards, and it's a cementitious siding. Once the containers are all installed and bolted together, there's a backing that's put on, and then the siding is attached with screws.
How finished is that unit once it's delivered?
The exterior unit comes as you see here. It has the waterproofing on it, the windows. The interior of the unit is completely done. The appliances are in, the cabinets are in, the fixtures are in. We do have a mate point where the two containers come together. There is some additional flooring material to cover up the mate point, as well as finishing off the walls and the ceiling. Right where you see the header, the mate point.
Basically, 2 types of shipping containers per unit. You have a kitchen half and a bathroom half.
Correct.
This is a 20-foot shipping container, 20 by 16.
It's 320 square feet.
Oh, the height cube.
They're 9'6".
Ceiling height of 8 feet, and this occurs, both in the common area and the bathrooms.
8-foot height is fairly consistent with conventional housing as well.
You also lose about 6 inches in the bottom framing, so you lose 6 inches in the top framing, 6 inches in the bottom. So that's where you end up with the 8 feet.
Use very tall windows and provide a lot of windows to bring in a significant amount of natural light. Utilities are running vertically in this. If you look in the bathroom where the tub is, that's where the vertical connections are for the systems, running vertically up through the floors.
We do have C channels in between each container. So in between each container, there's a cold form C channel that is, give or take 8 inches, literally a C-shaped channel at the perimeter.
The inherent nature of putting a channel on top of the shipping containers stiffens them enough to support those loads. So inherent with modular, you're going to have a floor and a ceiling backing up to a floor and a ceiling, and a wall to a wall. So you're going to have thicker wall assemblies with modular, just the nature of the construction type. For this particular project, the insulation was cut to match the corrugated metal so that we could keep as much interior space as possible. We tried to open the unit plan as much as possible to make it feel as open. These are smaller units. These are for transitional, formerly homeless residents. The goal was do the minimum bathroom we could per LA standards, which is pretty big, and then open up the rest of the space so that the living and the bedroom area feel as open as possible, so that you get the full 16 feet feeling as opposed to just the 8-foot container itself.
We did try to utilize the corners by adding another window, either where the TV is or the headboard. We found that, structurally these containers are self-sufficient. You can stack them on a ship up to 9 levels high, depending on the contents and the weight inside. The proportions work well for micro units, not as good for other types of units, but for smaller units like this, it worked quite well. Their size and structure are easy to transport, and you can finish out the interiors. And the wall and floor systems, as Erica mentioned, there is redundancy in stacking them, but they are fairly tight, and so they don't take up as much room as some of the other modular systems. From a challenge perspective, conventional housing, where you want larger bedrooms and living rooms, these would take a lot more work to cut up. We do like to use the high cubes for that additional height. If containers continue to get more popular, there might be a chance of having shortages in the high cube 9.5 foot high containers. It's also a very sustainable approach. We were published in the World Business Council of Sustainable Development. This was presented actually recently at the COP26 in Scotland. Our project and a number of other case studies. Ours was the only one representing a project from the United States.
Shipping containers are this kind of obsolete commodities. There's a whole bunch of them sitting around. How readily available are they?
For all of our shipping container projects, we've been able to find them. We haven't had a delay or concern or restrictions based on availability. It ranges anywhere from about 3,000 to 3,500 a container.
I mean, it's kind of ironic that the shipping container, which is known to be this green, sustainable alternative, is a construction process of extraction, of cutting out pieces. Any window cutout you do of a shipping container is going to be waste. Also, it's not sufficient in and of itself to provide the structural integrity for living unit.
It might be construed as waste for that particular housing development, but the company that was putting these together, they would recycle the waste. So it didn't just go into a landfill. And I would say when we did the retail components and we chopped up the containers, we actually took the cut pieces, panels, and used them for walls and other components. So there was no waste whatsoever. So it depends how you utilize the material. Not every site is going to be able to accommodate modular housing. If you have power lines, you're not allowed to crane modules over the power line. You also need to make sure that there's enough access from streets and for staging. So here you can see on the left side, the trucks coming in with the two containers on them, and they get lifted into place. So there's room to stage these containers offsite to load them onto the site.
Yeah, and that power line is actually running in front of the property, but because you are on a corner lot, you can come into the side.
That's exactly it. Some streets in Los Angeles have an alley network, but it is an issue to consider.
And that's like regardless. It's just any offsite modular. It's like regardless if it's a shipping container or wood or steel. So this next one, steel frame modular.
This is Oatsies Place. 46 units in LA. March will be the groundbreaking ceremony. The shipping container design was actually inherently a part of the development of this project when we first started. And there was a desire to actually break the 8-foot wide constraint. The way we ended up doing that was going the route of using light gauge frame and steel for this project.
Who are you using? How did you pick that steel frame manufacturer?
The same manufacturer that was on the other project, Watts, they actually transitioned their methodology to steel frame in the factory. So it is the same manufacturer as the previous project. They have now grown to include light gauge framing in their modular construction. That when they're starting to go multi-stories, they really lean on the light gauge framing and steel framing.
The same manufacturer, after going through the shipping container process, was like, let's change the methodology here. Why?
In addition to the width issue, they get to go away from having to cut holes in shipping containers and then steel and weld those holes back up for openings, be it windows or doors. They can build, starting from scratch, the openings located where they need them, right? So there's no removal of material to put material back in. Now we're really framing the box for its purpose. So we have 3 different mod widths here. Studio, previous project comprised of 2 mods. On this project, we're able to get the overall width with 1 mod.
16 feet wide by 20 feet?
Just under 16 feet. The 1 bedroom is comprised of 2 mods that are, I think 12 feet, or just under 12 feet each. And then the 2 bedroom, also 2 mods. Those are with the larger width dimension, 15.5 feet. So where we would have the 1 bedroom unit previously as 3 individual mods, we're now able to kind of reduce the number of boxes built to 2. Similarly, the 2 bedroom would be 4 or 5, and again the studio going from 2 to 1. So there is efficiency, I think, in the flexibility of the width here, and we're able to not only reduce the number of boxes built in the factory, but also reduce the number of boxes that are lifted and placed in site. A lot of these jobs are priced early on based on how many boxes, how many different mods. So if we can reduce the number of mods, the quantity, and then also reduce the number of lifting from the truck to the site, more cost efficient than having narrower mods. These are coming from Pueblo, and there was a lot of discussion early on actually the width of these mods. There are different thresholds, different crossovers, 12 feet, 14 feet, and 16 feet. I think everything below 12 feet really is in a pretty good spot, and you can avoid extra flag cars as you're transporting. And I think as you get into the 14 and 16 foot range, you do need to have flag transport vehicles with the shipping process. 16-foot width, I think, is a no-go. Really starts to bring too much cost to the project, where you start to lose the efficiency of the factory-built product. It was a very early on discussion with the factory and making sure that everybody on the team was comfortable with the added costs of the different thresholds, 12, 14, and 16. And before we went into construction documents, we did transition to the metal frame box. So that's where you're seeing the 20-foot depth. These definitely are not limited to 20 feet in depth. We can go much deeper, and being steel, we can use the inherent kind of structural properties of steel to span longer and not have a deeper floor profile. Had a lot of discussion about whether we wanted to retain the tube steel at the corners. On this project, we actually went away from the tube steel corners, and it's just light gauge framing, the metal framing doing the work of the capacity here.
When you start to cut up a shipping container, you lose a lot of the structural integrity of it, which is why we put those large C-channels on top of it to stiffen the original shipping container. The advantage of going to a steel modular is you don't have to reinforce something you're cutting up. You're starting with the frame, and you can build the frame the size you need. So we were able to do much more housing proportion frames that were limited only by what could be shipped.
The studio unit itself, I mean, is completely contained within one mod, which is fantastic. There's really, little to no work that needs to go into the interior of the studio unit. The exterior cladding is still happening on site. There is still the need to close up the exterior envelope on site. Everything on the exterior facade really gets done on site.
So you have a 1 or 2 bedroom in there. It's half a unit sitting there, and it's craned in. Like, you have to make sure it's not going to rain for the next 2 weeks or something while you seal it up, since you have exposed drywall to the elements.
It's a good question. If there is rain, that there is proper protection in place. Once the building is fully set, all the waterproofing goes on, and the exterior envelope is complete. Timing between the lifts varies, but I think there's somewhere between, on this project, 2 weeks. The weatherization of each floor occurs really towards, I'll call it, the end. And so I think on site, really, there's a lot of care taken to make sure that if there are rain events, that there is no damage to the interiors.
These are shipped fully enclosed, so no weather is getting into the modules as they're being shipped. Yeah. So when they're on site, they're sealed. Really up to the contractor on what day they decide to set, and they can usually set a floor within a day. So they can kind of keep an eye on the weather and plan ahead for that day that they plan to set.
The site is a little different than the corner site. This is an inline site.
My understanding, everything's going to be staged from Sherman Way, from the main street. And I believe they're going to work from the alley towards Sherman. These projects are going to be at the mercy of escalation and whether or not steel is going to be cheaper or more expensive. I will say one of the kind of interesting benefits of steel stud framing is that a lot of the factories now have the ability to roll out steel and form studs within their factory. And they actually purchase the raw coils and prepare the studs in-house. They are also purchasing from manufacturers such as Semco, but I think there are opportunities to subvert demand and escalation by bending steel in-house.
The overall purpose of this is also saving not just time, but money. Is this going to be, I guess, comparable in price on a total development budget as shipping containers?
Yes, thus far the pricing has been similar.
Any things you wish Steel Modular could do?
So I would love the connections for Steel Modular to be a little bit more simpler. Between welding and bolting, you have to get someone in to be able to get the 4 corners attached and rigidly connected. I think the connection points are becoming, I think, a little bit more streamlined, together better and quicker with less manual labor to kind of get in and holes to open up to get in to bolt them together or weld them together. An erector said it'd be great if there was a connection point that kind of, would click in and create a little bit more attachment without necessarily needing to manually get in and weld or bolt.
I guess let's move to this third project.
The Armory Arts Collective. So this project is in Long Beach, a new 58-unit wood modular housing project behind an adaptive reuse of the old Armory building on 7th Street near Gumbiner Park. This is workforce housing, 5 stories. It's 4 stories of modular over a podium, over one level that's going to be parking. We're entitled, and so we're starting construction documents and coordinating with the modular manufacturers. The advantage of being raised up is you have more access to those utility connections from underneath. When you're stacking it on crawl space, it's very tough to get down and get those utility connections put together.
Why wood for this project?
This was the next iteration of modular for our team. Wood is definitely a more flexible material. It draws a larger labor force. So there was a study on if we could bring the cost down by going with wood modular instead of steel. It's easier with wood, we suspect, for connections and on-site changes if there's anything that ends up happening during construction. A lot of the pricing comes down to how many modules go into a building, and wood modular is the unit, the corridor, and the unit. So you're building the unit on both sides of the corridor, unlike the steel we've done previously where they get set and the corridor gets built after the units are set. This one, the corridor is a part of the unit, a part of the module itself. Reduce the number of modules and therefore reduce the cost. Modules range, there's an 11-foot 4 module by 70 feet, and there's a 13-foot 4 module by 70 feet. So the living room's slightly wider. As Justin mentioned, you want to stay under that 14-foot dimension or else you end up with a lot of shipping costs.
So 70 feet. Is the length of this unit coming in?
So traditional residential housing is around a 30-foot depth unit. That's typically the depth of a unit to get your kitchen, living, and dining in one unit and your bedroom, bathroom, and closet. So that's a pretty standard dimension. It ranges from 30 to 34 feet, depending on whether you're going affordable or market rate. You add a corridor 6 foot, you add another 30 feet. So you're starting at 66 to 70 feet is your depth. 40 feet would be difficult because you're left with 10 feet after the unit, and it doesn't really work out to another unit.
And maybe there are some challenges with the transportation costs. However, you're not building a corridor on site, and you're bringing 2 modules that are already connected. So you have 2 modules in a corridor. So it's, instead of 3 pieces, it's 1 piece.
Because we were able to use wider modules, we're able to make that mate line be at doors. So you'll have a thicker door kind of portal, but it'll be less perceived in the space. The challenge on that is they are bigger modules. So because they're both sides of the corridor, it's a larger element that needs to get placed precisely. Additionally, similar to steel, we are beholden to the price of wood. So as wood goes up, this could be a more expensive construction type. If you are limited by a height limit, this product type is probably not going to be advantageous for you because you won't get the most amount of density you can within the height you're allowed.
So steel has a higher capacity to span over wood in the same depth. As you're spanning farther horizontally, the depth of the package actually doesn't need to get as deep as it would if it was a wood framing building.
So to maintain the same interior height of about 9 feet for a wood modular project, you're looking at 11.6 to 12 feet floor to floor. On steel, because the structural profile can be shallower, wood requires a higher floor to floor to keep the same interior clearances because wood doesn't span as far.
If you have a planning code requirement with a fixed height, wood modular might not be the right option because it's much taller floor to floor than other ways of building.
Yeah, so the floor assembly and your ceiling assembly are bigger in wood construction. So in that 40-foot height limit for wood, you would end up with more like 3 stories instead of 4. You know, the redundancy of the walls and the floors and the ceilings adds to that floor to floor height. So traditional floor to floor on stick-built construction is anywhere from 10 feet to sometimes 11 for more luxury units. Wood modular is starting around 11 feet because you have 2x10 for your floor assembly, maybe down to a 2x8 if you have smaller spans, and then a 12-inch to an 18-inch joist at the ceiling. these bigger assemblies, you have, let's say, the 2x8 plus, an 18-inch joist. That's your assembly rather than just the one floor joist that would be built, stick built.
Yeah, that's a great point. How did you find a crew that had experience doing this, given that this is such a new building typology?
We actually became a strategic partner with the contractor that was building the steel crafts. They are just committed to modular, and I would say the developer is as well. We're just all in. We're not halfway in. We're committed to doing this and learning about it and becoming experts at this. And I think having that commitment from all three was really important, because if you don't have a contractor that's completely committed, their fees are probably going to be higher. There is an educational component to this, and there is risk that you don't have based on not knowing what's happening until you built one of these.
Being that it is atypical, the modular construction process, I think a lot of questions do come up, and numbers have to be refined and scope has to be refined to make sure it's aligned with a modular project.
And bringing that contractor on early and creating that strategic partnership has really helped us sort of flush out a lot of these issues early on and sort of have those discussions of, okay, who's responsible for attaching this, or who's responsible for putting this material in, or how's that going to get done once we're signing off on the unit. So a lot of those conversations are happening up front rather than once the modular is out on site. Yes, the contractor came out, the whole team actually went out to the factory to tour and see how things were going together, how the process worked, what was involved.
And I think it's important to note that the general contractor actually hires the modular company. They're a sub to them. So all our communication still goes through the general contractor. Just like if there was a roofing question or concrete question, it would all go through the general. So the responsibility ultimately is on the general contractor.
Yeah, we have seen that there's what's called the design assist role early on in the project, where the modular team is brought in during the development of documentation, and they're advising along the way on what their preferences are for some of the methodologies that they lean on. That may be entirely different from one manufacturer to the next.
To like the kind of next phase of shipping container development, steel frame modular and wood frame modular, what do you see on the horizon that excites you?
Continue to hope that cities are flexible. This is a new technology, understanding their role. The state approves what happens inside the modular, but the city still approves what's happening on the site. And there's still a lot of gray area in between there, and getting that gray area eliminated obviously creates less risk, less time for everybody.
I'm excited about this product type because I feel like as it becomes more common and people become more familiar with it, we can bring down cost of housing, become the example for other cities to tour and look at and become familiar with, so that other people can build these as well.
Yeah, which system do you like the best out of all three?
It really depends. It depends on the site configuration. Can larger modules fit in? Can they not fit in? What's the queue in terms of the line of work that some of these companies have, and what's the program? Is it a micro unit, which might work better for container modular versus family housing, which needs larger room? I don't think there's a clear answer on one being a clear winner than another. They all have advantages and challenges. I think some of the other issues too is material costs. The price of lumber during the pandemic went up almost 4 times more than it normally is. That is enough to knock potentially wood modular out of the system. We've encountered developers that have said, yeah, I did one modular project and I'll never do it again, but they went with the wrong modular type. They maybe shouldn't have gone with steel. They should have went with wood or containers. So that is also concerning, because we don't want to create a pool of folks that are unsuccessful or frustrated. It doesn't mean modular doesn't work. It just may mean that particular modular type was not appropriate.
If you're building housing, especially if you're venturing into the modular world, it serves you well to be fluent in all three of them, just so you can balance, given the situation and all the considerations you highlighted, which one's the best. Otherwise, if you are only familiar with one, often modular could work for a site. You just have to know which tool could work. Great. Well, Erica, Justin, Michael, thank you for the presentation and talking through these 3 case studies.
Thank you.
All right, take care.